We're now going to dial in up to Brisbane and chat with Brendan O'Farrell. Brendan, are you on the line?
Yeah, yep. I got you now, yep.
I thought you were going to give us a beach backdrop from one of your recent Gold Coast escapes, but we've got you in a tie in the office.
You got me a tie in the office today, James, so I think I know where I'd prefer to be, and probably lucky enough to be in Queensland and be able to still do that, so yeah.
Well, mate, thank you so much for your wonderful support again of AHICE and helping it make it happen this year, which has been incredible. Mate, certainly some interesting times. I really want to sort of ask you about a service and the challenges of service during COVID, and I guess what kind of things have you taken away from that in terms of the new norm for you and everyone at Intrust?
Yeah, I suppose it's service is one of our key philosophies and objectives, and to be able to support our clients through that tough period has been very important to us, and it's been important to themselves too. So it's to be able to change our whole service delivery has been what has been key to us. Being able to meet face to face has been part of the old service way, and to be able to deliver things now through digital websites, webinars, etc., to help employers with their staff, just to continue that engagement is what has been key. It's been tough. I suppose what it's done is for a lot of businesses, it's actually brought forward a lot of their strategies, what people probably had in plan for the next 2 and 3 years, and has actually brought that forward to happen overnight. So, the team here has done a wonderful job in making that happen.
Now, when it comes to, one of the bigger issues at the moment, the release of super, obviously we've known a lot about that. We know a lot of people who've done that, have taken the $10,000 out. What are your thoughts on this, on the program itself, and what kind of impact has it had on your business?
Yeah, the $10,000. I mean, that was a bit of a surprise to everyone. It was a surprise to our whole industry. And that happened overnight. So we had to turn our systems upside down basically within 24 to 48 hours. What we established from that, there's a lot of people out there hurting, a lot of people that needed that support. So from that basis, we have no problems at all supporting those individuals that were in need at that time. There's a lot of them out there, and a lot of our clients in the audience today would have had those discussions, standing down people over that period of time, and those people needed that support. So our primary job was to make sure that we could facilitate that. Whether I think it's a good policy or not is probably another thing. What's probably a little bit disappointing is what you see what some of the things that people are using this money for, which is not the purpose. There's a lot of people out there that do need it, but when things start popping up on Facebook pages of new furniture and new cars and that, it's not for that purpose, and that's probably the disappointing thing. We've had about 20% of our membership utilise this facility, and probably about 10% of funds under management have gone out the door through this mechanism. So from that point of view, I can see what the government's trying to stimulate the economy, which it has. I think overall, the industry-wide value is probably somewhere $1 billion, which has gone out of the industry. So that's a big stimulus that's been put into the economy through that mechanism.
And what kind of impact do you think COVID and the early release is having on your investment strategy? Obviously, it's got to change your investment strategy dramatically, Brendan, when, like you said, 10% is coming out of funds already. So we're talking,
Yep.
Did you have to rework your strategy at any point in time, or did you just have to readapt it, or what did you do?
I probably say rework it. I mean, there's a lot of commentary around, which I think was pretty ill-founded actually, around liquidity. There's a lot of commentary in the media, the written media, about funds having liquidity issues, etc. I truly don't believe any funds had any liquidity issues, which is a good thing. But what it actually does do is that no one expects a government to open up a super fund like an ATM, right? We all have our long-term investment strategies in place. So we all had to have obviously a certain amount of cash and bonds, etc., a certain amount of liquidity to pay this money out. So what this will probably mean going forward is that we have to assume that at any point in time that there will be some sort of policy going forward that may see this occur again. So for us to be prepared for that, we're obviously going to have to carry a lot more probably cash and liquidity around, which will obviously have a longer term impact on performance going forward. And that's probably the disappointing thing about this policy, is that I believe it will have a long-term impact on investment performance across the majority of funds. But from a liquidity issue, as I said, I don't think any fund had any real problem. I think it was all a bit of a media beat up, which was probably disappointing and put a lot of scaremonger into the community, which wasn't necessary.
If you look at investment strategies, Brendan, you've obviously gone across several industries and pillars over the years, and you've obviously had shares in some of Australia's biggest and well-known hotels alongside a lot of commercial assets, etc., and here and around the world. What's your kind of strategy now? What kind of sectors do you like at the moment from an investment standpoint?
That's a good question, James. Diversification, I think, is probably the pitch at the moment. I mean, the markets around the world are getting a bit toppy. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world that probably hasn't really been there before. And, just with all the JobKeeper and job seekers and the stimulus that's been put into the economy from there, I think there's a bit of a false dawn coming. If our markets can continue to run with all this negative press out there, that's a little bit surprising. So my gut feeling is, and the way we're positioning our portfolios are, we do have a fairly defensive portfolio at the moment, so we will be holding those defensive assets to prepare ourselves for probably some sort of drawdown over the next 6 to 12 months when this stimulus eventually comes off. And that's probably the concerning bit, I think. The impact of that could be quite sharp when that does.
So does that mean you'll have to look sort of at more international investment, or will you keep more of a local focus then in that instance?
We're shifting some of our domestic allocation into international as we speak. So I don't mind saying that. I mean, internationally, it's a bit more broader and a bit more diversified than some of our local assets. So, yep.
Yeah, and you obviously have been very bullish on commercial real estate over the years from an investment standpoint as well. And how do you see that? Where obviously there's a different world, Brendan, where a lot of offices are empty in Sydney and other cities around the world. So how do you see that from an investment standpoint? Do you think, obviously, hotels or hospitality versus commercial? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the fast forwarding bit of from a real estate point of view has probably been in the retail. I mean, that's, again, these sorts of shocks probably bring forward a lot of strategies. And so if you look at the retail sector, where originally I think there was around about 16% people buying online, now that jumped 10% overnight. So there's around about 26% of the population now buying purchases online. So you really have to question about how retail assets, etc., are going to perform going forward. But what you'll see is that they'll still be an important part of the community. It's just a mix of those centres which will change. So instead of having your core shopping, your core tenants in there, the mix will just change to more entertainment type mixes. So it'll still draw people to those centres, and those centres will still be profitable. It's just this dip that we're going through at the moment. The commercial assets, you're still going to need offices, you're still going to need office buildings. I think when we all get through this, you'll still have people going back into the offices. I do believe there will be a change in behaviours and the way corporates will look at this as an opportunity to reassess their workforces and reassess the space required. But also, along with COVID and the social distancing, you also need space. So again, you'll still need your commercial assets and your buildings for people to go and work. I mean, that'll always be a part of our society.
Just to get a bit of a micro perspective, you're, I think, our only Queensland dial-in over the 2 days, Brendan, so we're going to have to ask you, what's the sentiment like in Brisbane? We've had so many different reactions on border closures and openings. We're hearing about borders being closed until after elections, and including Labor Party secretaries even saying that in emails to people. So what's the sentiment like in Queensland about that closure? It's obviously having a national impact from a headline story standpoint.
Well, obviously from hospitality and tourism, it's a massive impact. I mean, I don't have to tell the audience what happened there when the borders actually, when they came down, the positive impact that happened, and then when the borders went back up, the negative impact. So it was quite dramatic. And there's a lot of talk around about 28 days of no community transmission. If that's the case, I don't think I'll be seeing anyone in 2025. So I just don't think that's practical. I mean, there's a lot of euphoria at the moment around certain events that are happening in Queensland. Queensland seems to be operating in its own little bubble at the moment. And to be fair, you sort of get acclimatised to that a little bit to be raw. But it's not good. It's not good for the economy. It has to open up, I believe. And if it doesn't open up, you're going to find a lot more businesses run into difficulties going forward.
Obviously very tricky given you have such a large member base in Queensland, obviously, in terms of all the way from Cairns down the entire coast. So it's a challenge in North Queensland too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, North Queensland's pretty well been decimated. I think there's a lot of issues up there. As again, it opened up, occupancy went up, borders closed, occupancy went down. I really feel for some of those people up there. They're finding it difficult, and we know that what the patronage comes from New South Wales and Victoria into those northern part of Queensland. It's a popular tourist destination for those states. So it's had a massive impact, and it's obviously had more than just economic impact. And then you start getting the social impacts, etc., that go forward. So I think that's more of a concern to a lot of people also, not just the economic impact. It's the safe health and safety of individuals.
Now, before we let you go, one final question, Brendan. When it comes to helping and looking after the members of the super fund, what's the number one takeaway from you during the pandemic? You think that you've done the best in terms of supporting those with their money with Intrust from a super standpoint?
Look, and as I've continue to tell our team here, is that you're never going to get everything right, but you've got to learn from your mistakes. And I think, as I was saying, hopefully I'm not around for the next one that comes through, because this has been devastating. It really has. But hopefully we've learnt enough to prepare ourselves for the next one, and everyone can be prepared better. But communication, it always comes back to communication, and ensuring that your stakeholders, your employer base, your member base is up to date with what's happening. The early release taught us a lot. Never get in between someone and $10,000. That's all I can say. It was pretty brutal. So just communicate, let people know what's happening, let people know the processes, let them understand. That's just the most important thing, I think, from the takeaway from that. And we all think we do the right thing there and we do the best at it, but there'll always be an element of learning that will make us better going forward. And I think that's what's important.
Well, Brendan, thank you so much. Congratulations on your successes at Intrust. Be one of the best performing super funds in the country and have been for well over a decade. And thank you so much for your immense support of AHICE every year.
Great, thanks. Thanks everybody. Have a good conference.